Section 2.0, we deal with a concept called Newtonian impulse or impulse force, and is basically nothing glorious other than a force that exerts itself on an object for a very short period of time. When you snap your finger, when you hit on a drum, twang the strings, for a little short period of time, you exert quite a bit of force. I tried our best to use the symbolism that you find in the books, and that causes a bit of ambiguities. But you're always online. You can call us and ask, and also you can a little bit of reading. I try to avoid the English here. And in order for us to understand the impulse force, we need to understand a couple of symbols first. That this is time t, where our object is. This is time 0, where it was before in terms of time. And the subtraction of the two we call dt, or the difference of the t, or whatever you want to call it. The impulse force is nothing more than multiplying the force by a short period of time. That means t and t0 very close to each other. My apologies. And that J looking symbol that in physics they call them is basically nothing but the force times dt, and that gives you basically the change in momentum, and that means nothing to anyone really, but we make sense of it by doing a little bit of calculus. So we go down here to section 2.1, force approximation, and therein we make a couple of assumptions about our variables, functions, and symbols, and etc. RT is the vector pointing to the center of our ball at time t. Okay, this is a function at time t, gives us the position in xy or xyz, and we expand this RT. We assume the expansion is possible, and what we do is that we basically pass the expansion. Will be done. There are multiple ways of doing it. We do it with a Taylor series. In Mathematica, that function is called series. Without initialization for RT, just clear R and make sure there's nothing in T0. We use a different font, funky font for T0 so you can distinguish it from the T. And you run it. I'm going to run it here so we can play together. Here we are. And the Taylor series expansion gives us this: R at time 0 plus T minus T0, that's linear invariable T, times R prime, the first derivative of R at time 0, and R prime, derivative of R, in this case R being position, is nothing more than velocity or velocity vector. Basically right now we just doing very simple first year calculus. So all that suffering succotash money you spend on first year of calculus, finally you might see a return on investment on that one. All right, so then we do something a little bit bold here and claim that Newton's law of motion can be derived in our context from the Taylor expansion. And the first law of Newtonian mechanics asserts that the body remains at rest or in motion at a constant speed or velocity in a straight line unless it is acted upon by a force. Forget about the last part, unless, etc., etc. That's the second law. So what we do is that position that we calculated up there, we go and replace r prime of t by a constant called velocity. There we are. Now we are getting RT0, start of our time, a start of the time at T0, usually 0. And we just go add it by constant velocity times T minus T0, which is a polynomial of degree 1 all together. So this Newtonian law was inspired by Newton knowing that something, I'm not sure if he had Taylor expansions those years in his century, but he had a good understanding of what this R prime is. He and Leibniz had a good idea about derivatives, at least in one variable. Then we come down here and look at Newton's law of motion 2 that says at any instant of time, force on a body is equal to the body's acceleration, second derivative in time, multiplied by its mass, or equivalently, blah, 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 that goes to the end. So what does all that mean for second law? It is nothing really more than RT, position in time, of R, function R, but this time a Taylor series expansion uses degree 2 polynomial, and this is what you get for the expansion. You get position at time 0 plus R prime T, the velocity or speed, multiplied linearly by T minus T0. Remember, T0 most of the time is 0. And then the derivative cause the Taylor expansion. The way it works is that you take the factorial of the power, in this case 2, you make a term T minus T0 to the power 2, and divide it by a factorial 2, which is 1 times 2, here it is 2, and multiply it by a second derivation. This in other places, in other tech notes we have gone through this, so doesn't matter for now. Take this as the second degree expansion of your function R of t. In order to make it a little bit more legible, replace the R prime at T0 with velocity at time 0, and R prime at R double prime at T0, acceleration at time 0, and then basically here we are. Sorry, I did not run this before. Let me run it, and there we are. Otherwise I'll be lying. And then what happens, you get R of time 0, position at time 0, velocity of time 0 linearly multiplied by T minus T0, and 1/2 the acceleration times the duration of time of travel to the power 2. And you have seen this in high school, and you have seen this in your another monumental amount of money you spend on college physics, and that is if you replace the R prime T0, the first derivative, by V0, and all double prime T0 second derivative at time 0 with minus 9.81. You remember that's the G constant of gravity close to the crust of the earth, and you get this formula. And if you want to risk a few of your neurons, go to Wikipedia, and you see they have a funky the same formulation, except there's a sign appears in their formulation. The formulation is in this list, and that sign is due to the fact of the angle of the x-axis projection at time 20 is used. So actually what we meant before by V0 is V0 times sine of theta. The real nitty-gritty details of this are not very important. What is important that you're getting for second law, some sort of acceleration divided by 2 times t squared, and this over here. Initial velocity values per axis or whatever times time t. We assume that t0 goes to 0. That's our other assumption. Okay, so in general, you take this second degree expansion of the Taylor series, and all the magic in mechanics happens there, so far as Newtonian classics and our polymer theories are concerned, and the Brownian motions and so on. Now we go further down here, and then we do some experimentation. You expand for the first law RT, you get the same thing we had before, and then this time make the position a function of time, which is the Taylor expansion in terms of degree 1. And let me just make sure I run it here so we are up to date. At time 0 you get R0, okay. At time t you get R0 plus t times V0, velocity at time 0. We put that into action here, okay, and we get a straight line. If you recall Newton's first laws, that is, there is no force or acceleration, whatever, the projectile or the motion of the particle is like a it's going straight in a line in the space, and this line I studied at the velocity 111, so that is not the usual things they draw in the notebooks and the course books, and then I started it at position 1 on the x-axis. Okay. All right. So then we go and do the funky thing one more time, this time with degree 2, and we end up with 1/2 t squared that we played around upstairs, up there in the code. And let me just get updated. I run this again. We calculate position and time t as a normal expansion of RT of degree 2. Calculate position at time 0, that get R0 at time t, and this time we use g for the constant of acceleration. We get 1/2 gt2 squared. Unfortunately, because the way Wolfram Mathematica orders alphanumerically the variables and things, there's this term 1/2 gt squared. It just so happened that it occurred in the middle of the expression here, but that's technicality. This is the same as it was ordered before. Now what we do is that we do something super interesting, that we make g a downwards vector along z-axis of minus 9.81, and we go ahead and plot it. And let me see I have everything here. Let me see if it works. Yep, we plot it by putting our projectile at position 5 on z-axis over here. Okay, we give it a velocity 222, which is the velocity vector. Okay, let me just make this a little bit larger. Okay, and it has the famous parabolic shape that we all love to see in very high price courses we all paid for the university and college.